What's up? I can't pull that off. Sage Man here with podcast number 40. Another day, another episode of fan fiction, kids novels, and Disney films. Let's get right into it. And I finally figured out what that clicking noise is in recent episodes. Thanks to some video chats with my fiancée, I've come to realize that would be my incessant knuckle cracking. I had no idea I was doing that until she pointed it out. I will make an effort. Do not do that. I've also started to realize just how often I've been sniffling lately. It's super gross. Gonna try not to do that anymore either. Basically, 40 podcasts in, I'm still a very amateur podcaster, but starting now, I'll try to cut back on those nasty habits. So, over the past several episodes, I've been reading the Three-Way Crossover Saga, a 6-book crossover fanfiction that combined Monsters vs. Aliens with Twilight and Maximum Ride, which I wrote 10 years ago when I was about 17. In the previous episode, I finished the saga, and in this episode, my overall thoughts on it. Mostly terrible, but there were gold nuggets here and there, as I knew there would be. That's why I'm reading my old fanfics. Both of the scenes featuring Marcus were fantastic, a great look into the psyche of a Twilight character that nobody but me cares about, and I sort of replicated that with the SSKV character of Rhaenyra Celaeno, but the more dramatic parts really only work with Marcus. That's lightning in a bottle of fanfiction. The conclusion with Fallen was great and beautiful, and I think I'm going to listen to all the previous fanfic segments to get a full idea of what they're all about. BRB. I'm back. My goal here is, like when I recap Keys and Kingdom segments, to find nuggets that I can use in my own writing. This fanfic inspired Iris and SSKV, and I want to be reminded of what I can use in those. So I didn't get much, ultimately. I mean, there was a brief mention of hoverboards. It's such a throwaway mention in both the story and my synopsis of that I gave on the podcast. It gave me the idea of hoverboards being so ubiquitous in the setting of Iris that they're barely worth mentioning. That's a good sci-fi detail. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna write all this down and stick it in my Word document about Iris. To check later. Not working on Iris anytime soon. I've got other projects, but, okay, what if the cast of Iris form a musical group? Not anywhere near the beginning of the story, because that would clash with the serious tone, but maybe later on when things start to go better for our characters. You know what else would clash with the tone? The queso dip joke. Or perhaps the mozzarella sticks joke. I was thinking about adding that to SSKV, but you know what? I'll put it in Iris. That's where it belongs. Iris needs that occasional bit of levity. As for Fallen and Solar, I always knew they'd be a part of Iris, but I've always been working under the assumption that I changed their names to something else. But yeah, you know what? I'm sticking with Fallen and Solar. Those names just fit them perfectly. For more minor notes, the shoulders joke and the I want to go home bit, both from the same chapter, fit Iris perfectly, as does the la-di frickin' da line when peace and happiness comes. Las Vegas appears briefly. What if in Iris there's some equivalent to Las Vegas, an apocalyptic style one? And, well, I'd like to repurpose the notion of 3 heroes becoming goddesses called the Moon, Sun, and Stars, but in all honesty, I don't think that can be done. I think that was kind of another thing that could only possibly be done with my specific fanfiction premise. I just sniffed again, damn it. Okay. And then characters, all the characters I introduced are my intellectual property, and I might as well use every one of them. There are 2 characters from this story that I have not repurposed for other stories yet. One is Alucci. Her only notable trait is that she wants to see everything, but I can work with that. I might be able to expand upon her character. And also Frick. I think I was mistaken when I said I'd repurpose Ted and all his cronies for Iris. I don't think I did anything with Frick. Maybe because there's already a character in Iris named Fick, and, I didn't want it to get confusing. It's probably also why I wanted to change Fallen's name, so as not to confuse him with Fallon. What the heck. I'll make Iris such a huge universe that occasional similar names are unavoidable. And finally, the story did give me one idea for SSKV. As I said, Celaeno from SSKV is largely inspired by Marcus, and so Marcus's final fate in this story might be passed along to Celaeno. And we return to Droon. Doing that after a special edition is always a little bit underwhelming, isn't it? After the momentous events of a special edition, going back to a relatively mundane Droon adventure, it's good for cleansing the palate. It's Book 32, The Treasure of the Orkins. Chapter 1, Out of the Blue. Eric is called to Droon by dreams of blue snow and Galen calling him for help. He gathers up Neil and Julie, and they enter Droon in a storm. Yes, there's more to the chapter than that, but I can't tell you everything, jeez. Chapter 2, North of Jaffa. They are rescued from the snowstorm by Friddle and Max, piloting Kia's airplane, the Dragonfly. Friddle hasn't appeared in forever. I did a count recently of every character's appearances. Basically, Friddle is very recurring in Season 2, then completely disappears for a while, and finally comes back for this 2-book story arc here in Season 5. Kind of erratic. The Dragonfly meets up with Galen and Queen Relna. Eric tells of his dream of blue snow, which is spoken of in a legend of an event 100 years previous, when blue snow fell and a rift appeared that allowed anyone at all to pass between Droon and the upper world. Kia arrives, and they split up. The children and Max go to Lumpland to help with the situation there, while Galen, Relna, and Friddle will go north, outside of the reader's perspective, to see if this event will repeat. The two groups will keep contact with the twin orbs of Dubesh, which Galen has tamed. Chapter 3, The Magic Pyramid. The kids ride to the dunes of Lumpland to find the village has been destroyed by the rat-faced snitchers of Zoop, whom the kids had previously encountered in the past. They use their rad tracking skills to find that the snitchers and the lumpies had a battle for something buried beneath a dune of living sand, which cannot be dug up without the use of magic. So Kia uses the magic that'll dig it up. Turns out it's a giant pyramid. The snitchers ride in, each one bearing a chained lumpy on their pony like a shield. The snitchers include the bombastic Captain Plundit, his straight-faced Lieutenant Smeed, and their nameless troubadour who performs terrible songs about their glory. The snitchers attack. Chapter 4, The Big Attack. Plundit makes his way past the heroes and into the pyramid. Neil and Eric follow him in. In the depths of the pyramid is a small box bound with heavy chains, and when Plundit steals it, the pyramid starts collapsing. Plundit and Smeed prepare to take the unknown treasure back to Zoop, inadvertently giving the kids directions to Zoop as they do so, 'cause they dumb. Zello and Khan are left behind, and Khan explains he doesn't know what the treasure is, just that his ancestors were tasked with guarding it. The kings stay behind to rebuild the village, while Max and the kids proceed to Zoop to reclaim the treasure. Chapter 5, Storm of Snow, Storm of Sand. As they pursue the snitchers on their pilkas, Galen calls via the ruby orb and reminds Neil that he has the power to turn his turban into a river they can use to travel, calling back to our first encounter with Hoja. So Neil does that, giving them a faster means of travel. They get attacked by snakes along the way, beastly snakes, confirming that Ko is behind this theft. The snakes kidnap Max and overturn the kid's boat. Chapter 6, Zoop, Zoop, and more Zoop. There's some battle, and they're all at risk of drowning until Neil turns the river back into his turban. The four kids head to Zoop, assuming they'll find Max there. They're unable to contact Galen with the ruby orb, so Julie flies north to try to make contact with him. Kia, Eric, and Neil run into Jumbo the Orkin, who explains that the treasure the snitchers stole is an Orkin treasure, a magical blue snowflake collected 100 years earlier. Kia decides that the three of them will disguise themselves as beasts and smuggle Jumbo into the snitcher camp as a prisoner. She casts a spell that unfortunately turns them into the same embarrassing beasts Kid Spar turned them into back in Dubesh, and they enter the camp. Chapter 7, Hula Mula. They bring Jambo before Plundit and Smeed, and they confirm suspicions that Ko is on his way. To stall for time, Jambo makes up a complex magic ritual that must be performed to open the box properly, Neil aiding the deception with his genie magic, while Kia and Eric search for Max. Chapter 8, A Gift from Above. Julie meets up with the two of them, reporting not only that Galen, Friddle, and the Queen are trapped in a terrible snowstorm way up north, but also that Emperor Ko is on his way. They reunite with Max and formulate a simple plan to get all 6 of them out of here with the treasure. But Ko arrives and recognizes the Beast, Eric, Kia, and Neil as old colleagues of his, throwing a wrench in the plan. Chapter 9, Enemies in High Places. Ko invites the disguised beasts to dinner, and there he tells Eric a secret. The treasure, the single blue snowflake, is part of a prophecy Gethwing relayed to Ko, that in the far north the sons of Zara will unite, and one of them will die. At that moment, the beast disguises fade away, and they snatch up the treasure chest and flee. Chapter 10, Into the Blue. Max and Julie enact their ambush, so the team do pretty well against Ko and the snitchers. Suddenly Gethwing appears, and he tosses Ko aside and scares the snitchers away. Turns out it wasn't Gethwing, but Galen in disguise. He, Friddle, and the Queen were rescued from their predicament by Mudgy, Jumbo's uncle, the Orkin who used to be the Nin who originally found the blue snowflake. All the heroes board the Dragonfly and head north. So not much to say about this book. I guess it's a little funnier than average. The many scenery changes and implications of wider things going on in Droon than we're aware of are very nice, and the snitchers are good one-shot characters. So guest stars, starting with the Snitchers. Plundit is very loud and bombastic, and Smeed very straight-laced, and I thought it would be quite perfect to cast Jim Belushi and Diedrich Bader, because I'm an old soul, and apparently I'm into really old voice actors. I figure their singing troubadour merits a guest star as well, so how about Quentin Flynn? My original casting plan for Muji was Miguel Ferrer. When he died, I did not go for a Star Kid or Rooster Teeth replacement because I wanted this character to have the gravitas of being genuinely old and distinguished and, you know, a veteran. So, someone like Miguel Ferrer, tough as nails, probably Latino. How about Danny Trejo? Yeah, works for me. And now the only segment anybody actually listens to, and as much as anyone listens to the podcast at all, Keys and Kingdoms. You know, I'm not bitter or anything about the general viewership of the channel, that's fine. It's my first year, I'm still doing really random crap and playing really old video games. I average about 5 views per video these days, and that sounds about right. Tomorrow I'm going to start covering the Little Mermaid TV series, and I'm going to start releasing videos that are just about the Little Mermaid TV series, and those will certainly get more attention than my videos about a bunch of stuff. Nobody knows what a TAPAS and Stuff podcast is, but a Little Mermaid retrospective, that'll be a thing that's recognizable as a thing. Anyway, today it's 1991, only 2 collection-worthy movies this year, but one of them's a really big one. We're starting with The Rocketeer. That's not the big one. I believe this is about an armored superhero in, like, the World War II era or something. I think there's Nazis in it. I think Timothy Dalton is the bad guy. I love Timothy Dalton. So yeah, I don't know jack squat about this film. I glanced at its Disney wiki page, might have seen the Disney December video on it back before I realized Doug Walker blows. I don't really remember anything. So Disney Plus came out a couple days ago, but I'm going to watch these last 5 films on YouTube anyway, out of loyalty to YouTube Movies for getting me through this whole first year of my project. You know, been fiddling around with my Disney Plus account, trying not to get ahead of myself in my collection, but I did watch a few of my favorite Pixar films, and even looked into Steamboat Willie, 1928, first appearance of Mickey Mouse, and The Wise Little Hen, 1934, first appearance of Donald Duck. That was pretty awesome to see. Anyway, The Rocketeer, a Disney Junior series based on it, started like a week ago, so I guess preschoolers like this movie. I'm so sure. So, what the fuck are we looking at here? Okay, no Disney logo, just credits. Joe Johnston is our director. He does good spectacle. Bill Campbell is our star. As I understand it, this is his only big film role he's ever had. Campbell plays a pilot named Cliff, and we open on him flying an adorable little yellow prop job. I'm going to assume said plane is a pretty hot new invention in the film's time period, the late 30s. I'm getting vibes similar to the first Captain America film, which makes sense, as that's also a World War II era superhero film directed by Joe Johnston. It seems Cliff races planes for a living, like in the movie Planes, rather than being a combatant sort of air pilot. Then we cut to some sort of car chase slash gunfight, and as Cliff's plane happens to pass overhead, one of the gunmen panics and shoots his plane down. Cliff manages to make it back to his airfield before he crashes. Cliff and his engineer Peavy, played by Alan Arkin, are rather peeved at the pursuers in the car chase, who turn out to be the feds, for destroying their prized plane. One of the crooks they were chasing hid the gizmo he was transporting in the aeronautics place thingy. The gadget's inventor is a fictionalized Howard Hughes, played by Terry O'Quinn. The government want him to rebuild the gizmo, presumed destroyed in the chase, but Hughes laments that such a thing is impossible, and he didn't approve of the device being weaponized anyway. Cliff and Peavy have to sell their plane for scrap and lament that they may have to go back to their clown act to pay off their debts. But Cliff is determined to blow the dust off their old plane and get it working again. In the old plane, Cliff finds Hughes' gadget where the thief stowed it. A motherfucking jetpack, that ultimate expression of futurism. The main concern of inventing the jetpack is that it would burn the shit out of your calves, but I saw a video just the other day. They did invent what they're calling a real-life Iron Man suit, but it's basically a jetpack. Goes pretty fast, I think. Not as fast as Iron Man, but, well, how fast Iron Man can go does strain my suspension of disbelief at times, so I'm good with that. I've been thinking, you know, since Iron Man is a staple of Marvel ever since the MCU, and Marvel is one of Disney's biggest films, yeah, that kind of armored propulsion thingy is definitely something that ought to go in Keys and Kingdoms, a special suit of plate armor that grants the power of propelled flight. Perhaps a magic item, or depending on your setting, a not magic item. We'll see what the Rocketeer does with this jetpack. I know the character wears something of a suit of armor himself, or at least a helmet. So Cliff and Peavy realize it's a jetpack and start tinkering with it. Alan Arkin is pretty good. I mostly know him from The Last Unicorn, in which he was god-awful, so good thing that was his only voice acting role, and he's actually pretty good in front of the camera. So we meet our villain, movie star slash Nazi spy Neville Sinclair, played by Timothy Dalton, who's explaining to his henchmen why the feds are so interested in the package he had them steal. See, I knew Timothy Dalton was the villain, but I assumed they'd be playing that for a twist. And he plays the role with an American accent. Not too bad. Alright, so I've been calling it a jetpack, but it's really more of a rocket pack. Relevant distinction. Still with the burn your legs off problem, though. Our female lead, Cliff's actress girlfriend Jenny, played by Jennifer Connelly, is introduced putting on stockings. Rrr, call me sold. They go to a movie. Jenny is a fan of Sinclair, but Cliff is pretty sick of him, and also sick of seeing Hitler in the newsreels. So, nothing happens for a while. Peavy designs the Rocketeer's iconic helmet, just for protection, and also as a rudder to steer the rocket pack. Cliff visits Jenny on set, where she's an extra in Sinclair's latest movie. Sinclair overhears Cliff telling Jenny about the rocket pack. Small world. So Sinclair starts chatting Jenny up, asking her to dinner, and offering her a bigger part in the film. So, what's happening here? Some clown, as in an actual clown, dressed up as a clown and everything, tries to fly Cliff's old plane, but he hasn't flown a plane in a while, so he's in trouble, so Cliff puts on the rocket pack and the helmet to save the clown. Is that what I'm looking at? Well, he saves the clown, photographers everywhere, soon all the newspapers are talking about the Rocketeer. Sinclair and Hughes, of course, immediately know what's going on. Sinclair's giant mutant of a henchman Lothar, played by a giant mutant of an actor called Tiny Ron, comes to Peavy's house, and there's a fight scene between him and Cliff, then a shootout with, I missed whether it was crooks or feds. They dressed the same in the late 30s. I'm bad at following plots. I was expecting more Nazi punching action by this halfway point of the film, but I guess this is more of an origin story. Okay, what happens? The crooks go to the local coffee shop looking for Cliff because they've heard he's a good pilot and think he might be the Rocketeer. No one is willing to sell Cliff out, so they start torturing Peavy and find Jenny's phone number, where they learn Jenny is out to dinner with Sinclair. When the crooks go after her, Cliff gets ready to put on the Rocketeer suit to go save her. Peavy fixes a leak in the rocket pack by sticking a wad of chewed gum in it. Cliff makes his way to the fancy restaurant before the crooks do, because he's speedy, and disguises himself as a waiter. He sees Jenny dancing with Sinclair and gets all sad. I really like Campbell, the actor playing Cliff. He's quite charismatic and expressive. Cliff manages to take Jenny aside, since Sinclair has never met him, and begs her to hide. Unfortunately, she doesn't quite believe his story and hasn't yet heard of the Rocketeer because she's been busy, but she decides to trust him and get herself out of harm's way. Lothar and the crooks start chasing him through the restaurant, and he uses the rocket pack to escape through the restaurant, making a big mess of things and forcing an evacuation. There's a big battle, Cliff and Jenny on one side, Sinclair and his minions on the other, and there's still nearly 40 minutes left in the movie. This is not the climax. Maybe he'll start fighting Nazis after all. Jenny manages to knock out Lothar with a blunt instrument, which is impressive, and Cliff escapes by blasting through the ceiling, but Sinclair chloroforms Jenny, hence this not being the climax. Jenny awakens in Sinclair's home, and he tries to comfort her, trying to paint himself as protecting her from the bad guys, but unfortunately for him, she recognizes his insincerity because every line he says is a quote from one of his movies, so she pretends to go along with him, then lamps him with a vase. She also easily finds a secret passage behind his bookcase where he has blueprints for the rocket pack. She pockets those and finds the radio he uses to communicate with the Nazis. Unfortunately, Sinclair and Lothar have both regained consciousness by now. Not realistic. Getting knocked unconscious by a blow to the head is often depicted in stories as a humane way of temporarily incapacitating somebody, but honestly, if you hit somebody hard enough to knock them out, you may as well have killed them, unless you get them some immediate medical attention. I might acknowledge this in Iris for the sake of grittiness, but not in Keys and Kingdoms. It's just too convenient, knocking people out. Cliff gets a call at the coffee shop telling him to come to an observatory with the rocket pack or else they'll kill Jenny, but the feds scoop him up before he can mount his rescue. As it turns out, Peavy has also been nabbed by the feds, where we find Hughes is very complimentary for the improvements Peavy's made to the rocket pack and the complimentary helmet. Hughes doesn't want the rocket pack surrendered to Sinclair's men because he knows the Nazis are planning to create an army of Rocketeers, as demonstrated by a cartoon they smuggled out of Germany. Okie dokie. Cliff pleads with Hughes and the feds to let him make the exchange for Jenny's life, providing them the valuable intelligence that the Nazi agent they're working for must be Sinclair. They don't believe him, so he fights his way out. Hughes lets him get away. Cliff comes to the rendezvous alone with the rocket pack. Cliff and Jenny talk their way out by revealing to Sinclair's henchman that he's a Nazi. The leader of Sinclair's henchmen is patriotic enough to turn against him for this, but Sinclair shouts in German and an entire Nazi platoon pops out of nowhere. Yikes, but I like that they played on the criminal's patriotism here. That was a nice touch, an interesting dynamic. So the henchmen lay down their guns, but a fucking humongous Zeppelin passes overhead. What the hey? But then the FBI shows up, and there's a massive, chaotic gunfight that's quite confusing. I'm trying to follow it. Okay, so Sinclair and Lothar load Jenny into the Zeppelin. Sinclair tells his superiors, "We've got the girl. The rocket will come to us." But the Rocketeer pursues the Nazi-tastic Zeppelin. Seriously, how'd they get that thing all the way to Hollywood? I don't get it. The Rocketeer has to fight Lothar hand-to-hand, or rather hand-to-wrench. Lothar is armed with a big-ass wrench. Cliff defeats Lothar and crashes into the engine room, and it's here I do have to compliment Cliff's neato double-breasted leather jacket. It's his trademark, kind of an iconic part of the Rocketeer's image. There's a final battle in the cabin of the Zeppelin, and in the end, Sinclair straps on the rocket pack and flies away with it. It's gonna run out of fuel, isn't it? No, it sprung a leak. Okay, it sprung a leak, so Sinclair dies in a horrible fireball, which crashes to Earth on the Hollywoodland sign, turning it into the Hollywood sign. Ah, love that. That's a nice touch. Knowing that the hydrogen in the Zeppelin will ignite once the fire reaches it, Cliff and Jenny declare their love for one another, sure that they're about to die, not helped by Lothar coming at them with a knife. Sure enough, the Zeppelin explodes, but Cliff and Jenny are saved by Hughes and Peavy in a helicopter thingy. The next day, Cliff, Jenny, and Peavy go out to eat when they're approached by Hughes, who asks a moment alone with Cliff, wanting to know what it was like being the Rocketeer. Cliff says it was the closest I'll ever get to heaven, Mr. Hughes, but rethinks that when he looks at Jenny. As it turns out, the plane Hughes arrived in is a gift for Cliff, in thanks for saving the day, and Jenny still has the blueprints for the rocket pack and gives them to Peavy. Jenny and Cliff make out while everyone in the diner takes a good look at Cliff's new plane. And the credits roll. Must resist urge to skip the credits, I made a promise. Okay, I watched them. That's 3.5 minutes I'll never get back. So, not a bad movie. Not my favorite, but it was fun, and I really like the hero's aesthetic. And now, the tale as old as time, Best Picture nominee, Beauty and the Beast. It needs no introduction. Let's go. And we open on reused animation of Bambi's mother. Oi, hey, this is supposed to be the Renaissance. Anyway, our narrator, David Ogden Stiers, tells us the tale of the prince. Let's get this out of the way. The timeline set up by the film means the prince was 11 years old when the enchantress cursed him. As I understand it, the remake took great pains to alleviate this supposed plot hole. I'm like, whatever, it's a fairy tale and it's also a cartoon. People are always younger than they reasonably should be in both of those genres. Did I just call this film a cartoon, and cartoons a genre? Wow, I feel dirty. So this alleged enchantress, I'm guessing she's a fairy, no human enchantress, just the trickery she performs strikes me as just too douchey for a human to do, if you'll forgive the faith in my own species, but seems well in line with the sort of thing a fairy would do. A very high-level sorceress to be able to cast the wish spell, the only D&D effect that could possibly bring about the highly specific curse on the beast. And let's talk about the Beast, even though we don't get our first really good look at him until later. The character design of this guy is just brilliant, and takes advantage of the medium of animation. You couldn't do a beast this beastly in a stage or live-action production, and indeed, in the remake, they don't. And they created this incredibly monstrous creature just by mixing and matching bits and pieces from other animals in just the most perfect possible way. Starting at the bottom, the Beast has the hindquarters of a wolf, the torso of a bear with hands, since he has fairly bear-like hands, but they're definitely hands, a lion's mane, and then his head is that of a bison of all things. A bison with boar tusks, and for the sake of expressing emotion, the brow of a gorilla and human eyes. His Keys and Kingdoms counterpart, gonna create a creature of that exact description, cause it's perfect. I don't want the Beast to be a unique entity, no, I want the Enchantress to have turned him into an actual thing. What to call this creature? Beast is far too generic, it's an entire creature category. Creatures made up of many different creatures are technically called chimeras, but when most fantasy buffs think chimera, they think very specifically of the creature that has aspects of a lion, goat, and serpent. I think, and I'd like to shake hands with myself for coming up with this, I think for now as a placeholder, and nothing is ever so permanent as a placeholder, I'll call him a Kalidah. Kalidas are creatures from the first Wizard of Oz book, which are essentially lion-tiger-bear hybrids. hence why the cast of the Wizard of Oz movie were specifically worried about lions, tigers, and bears. Yes, you heard right, I managed to say lions, tigers, and bears without amending it with oh my. That takes a lot of strength to do, I'll have you know. So yeah, when the Beast jots down his character sheet under race, he puts Khalida. Glad we settled that. So after our prologue, we meet Belle, played by Paige O'Hara, the 5th Disney princess, and the last white Disney princess for quite some time, which is kind of interesting. The first 5 are white, then we have Middle Eastern, Native American, Chinese, African American, and then 4 more white ones, and then Polynesian. That's a pretty diverse doll franchise. Granted, it took them way too long to get to black. I love Tiana, but I will call them out for waiting until 2009 to create a black character in their multi-ethnic long-running franchise, but all the same, how many franchises have Middle Eastern, Native American, and Polynesian characters? Not bad, Disney, not bad. To be more specific than white, let's look at the 9 white ones. 2 are German, 2 are French, 1 is obviously Scottish, 2 from the same movie are Norwegian, and then I'm not sure what Aurora is. I want to say either English or French, but I'm actually not sure. And then Ariel, well, she's a mermaid, but, you know, some say she's obviously Danish and therefore shouldn't be played by a black actress, but fuck those people. She's a fucking fictional creature with fire truck red hair. Anyway, I went off on a tangent there, as an inaccurate one, as there are, in fact, 11 Disney princesses, not 14. Moana has never been formally inducted into the franchise, as they usually are, and Anna and Elsa won't ever be because they have their own merchandising empire, but hey, those 3 were in the Disney princess scene in Wreck-It Ralph 2, so I still count them. A lot of tangents. We haven't even gotten to the first number yet, and what a first number it is. Menken and Ashman used their Broadway roots when they scored The Little Mermaid, but they really leaned into it with this film. Every number is a big crowd song or production number that would fit right in a stage production. And I'm sure it does. A year from now, my beloved Quincy Community Theater is putting on a stage production of Disney's Beauty and the Beast, and you can bet I'm going to audition. I think I'd make a good Lumiere. I hope I have the kind of stability in life that I can finally be living alone in my beloved Quincy by this time next year. You know who I like? The Bimbettes. That's what they're called. I believe it's a portmanteau of bimbos and triplets. The one in green is voiced by Kath Soucie, and the other 2 by the late Mary Kay Bergman, so major animation star power there. And, well, what can I say? I'm a simple man. 3 identical blondes with meticulously animated jiggling cleavage. I'd like to be that water pump right about now. Arrgh. Belle's father, Maurice, played by Rex Everhart, is the town's resident inventor. That's a thing you could be back in the day, an inventor. Many of America's founding fathers invented things. It was easy to be an inventor prior to the 20th century because we didn't know squat about science, but now we do. And while there are surely things left to invent, there's nothing left to invent by tinkering around in a lab. Last time I heard about a patent, it was for objects photographed against a white backdrop using a certain technique. It's a good time to be alive, medicine and communication and social justice-wise. Good is a relative term, but the best humanity has ever seen. You know, we're moving forward, we're getting better. What is my point? Well, Maurice has invented some sort of woodcutting machine. Sure, that's an invention. So no K&K content in Belle's provincial life, maybe in Maurice's woodcutting machine. Let's talk about the fact that this is the last Disney animated canon film for quite some time in which none of the voice actors have singing doubles. Aladdin, Lion King, Pocahontas, and Mulan all had at least a few characters, including the main leads of all 4 films, who have a separate voice actor and singing voice, and then Disney stopped making musicals for a while. Aladdin, Lion King, Pocahontas, Mulan, Hercules, and 96, that's Hunchback. I forgot Hercules and Hunchback, okay, but they had singing doubles too. Okay, and then Disney stopped making musicals for a while, and the Disney Revival went back to using voice actors who could do their own singing, so every actor in The Princess and the Frog, Tangled, and Frozen does so. There's one singing double in Moana. Now, if I was given the choice, I would cast voice actors who could sing, but I certainly don't begrudge if a casting choice is really good but not capable of doing their own singing. Basically, the Nostalgia Critic put it best. You know, if an actor's singing voice works for the character, great. If not, hire them a double. Basically, he advocated for a case-by-case basis. Yes, I cited the Nostalgia Critic. Like I said, I refuse to pretend he's always been a hack. He's just, you know, clinging to his now-dead brand. So Maurice gets the woodcutting machine to work and sets off to a fair of some sort where he hopes to win a prize, but he gets his ass lost in the woods. The family horse, Philippe, is apparently voiced by Hal Smith. It's surprising how many voice actors in the 80s and 90s could do really convincing creature work. Frank Welker and D. Bradley Baker have all but monopolized that market, and that's too bad. I'd like to see what some other VAs are capable of. Doing voices is kind of a dying art. Nowadays, most animated characters just sound like regular dudes. It's like just acting now. Maurice finds himself at a grandiose castle, which, I think in the remake there's some junk about how the Enchantress made the villagers forget about the castle and the royals. What the fuck ever. Never saw it, the remake, and, okay, I'm going to see it because it's on my list, but whatever. And there, Maurice meets some of the beast's enchanted furniture, members of the castle staff who are unjustly cursed alongside their sovereign. Household utilities such as Lumiere the candelabra, played by the late Jerry Orbach, Cogsworth the clock, played by the late David Ogden Steers, and Mrs. Potts the teapot, played by Angela Lansbury. Angela Lansbury's not dead, right? Okay, no, she's alive. She's 94, but she's alive. And anyway, also Mrs. Potts' son, Chip the teacup, played by Bradley Pierce. And here we finally meet the Beast, though they keep the lighting in this scene fairly bad for the time being to facilitate a dramatic reveal when Belle first gets a good look at him. The Beast is voiced brilliantly by Robbie Benson, who is believed to have really been the guy who said the quote that's been attributed to many different actors about the 5 stages of being an actor. Stage 1 is Who's Robbie Benson? Stage 2 is Get Me Robbie Benson. Stage 3 is Get Me a Robbie Benson type. Stage 4 is Get Me a Young Robbie Benson type. And Stage 5 is Who's Robbie Benson? I'd wager he's in Stage 5 at this moment. Who is Robbie Benson? The Beast, that's who Robbie Benson is. Best performance of the man's career, though granted the only other thing I've seen him in was as Sabrina's dad in the early seasons of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And also he directed a few episodes of Friends, but I don't think he acted in any of them. Anyway, back in the village, Belle is accosted by the town hunk Gaston, played by Richard White, who thinks that as the 2 most good-looking people in the village, they should be together. A bit of entitlement he feels so strongly that he's already prepped their wedding outside her house. She turns him down quite epically and runs off into a meadow for the most iconic of the Disney Princess I Want songs. Every Disney princess has an I Want song, except Jasmine, since she's not the main character of her movie, but Belle's reprise of her self-titled song is perhaps the most iconic I Want song of all time, and as they say, there are only 2 types of songs, the I Want song and the I Am song. So we're talking top 2 songs of all time. I want adventure in the great wide somewhere. I'm no Paige O'Hara. Also, I'm sitting down, so my range isn't, Philippe returns to Belle, and Belle has him take her to where Maurice is, and, because that's the kind of thing you can reliably do in a Disney film, give an animal verbal directions that it completely understands. Belle enters the castle, and all the furnishings are excited that a girl has entered their midst. No excitement that the Beast might earn someone's love when Maurice showed up? I guess the Beast is a confirmed heterosexual, or possibly just takes him closer to his own age. Beast is nearly 21, I assume like it's his 21st birthday at the climax, because the rose is about to wilt. And Belle is 17. Whether people of that particular age difference should date falls into a bit of a moral gray area, it seems, like, it makes me recoil a teensy bit. But yeah, when the older party is such a ridiculously young age as 21, and the younger party is as close to the line as 17, you can't really justify any kind of moral outrage, honestly. I guess my main concern would be whether it's legal in the state where it's happening. 16 and 20? No. 18 and 22? Maybe. 17 and 22? Heck no. But 17 and 21? Case-by-case basis. How old is Prince Eric? His voice actor was 17. His voice actor wasn't too old for Ariel. I get the feeling maybe Eric was. Who the heck knows? So we get our first good look at the Beast, and Belle trades her life for her beloved father's. The Beast sends Maurice back to the village in an incredibly sinister, spidery animated carriage. That fucking thing doesn't get enough love. It's only in the film for a few seconds, but it's badass. The Beast, like his servants, is aware that this is his only chance at finding love and breaking the curse, so he makes an effort to be less beastly, starting now. This is not a story about an abusive relationship or Stockholm Syndrome. This is a story about a woman who refuses to befriend a man until he starts being nice, and a man who genuinely seeks his own betterment. The captivity angle twists it a bit, but she's clearly there for several months at least, and ultimately it's one of the healthier Disney relationships, certainly the healthiest and most relationshipy one we've seen thus far. Although, now that I think about it, maybe it isn't months. It certainly looks like months, based on the scenes in Beast's castle, but the timeline of the scenes taking place outside the castle, out in the village, don't line up with that at all. Not a very tight script, this movie, but, you know, delightful fairy tale. Doesn't need one. I do like the implication that the Beast becomes more beastly in his mind and mannerisms the longer he's been cursed, you know. By the time he meets Belle, he's down to wearing just a cape, and his stance is usually quadrupedal. The directors say that if he had never met Belle, he'd probably have ditched the clothes entirely and walked on all fours the rest of his life, but instead he starts wearing a bit more and standing upright more often. Anyway, back to the movie. Gaston, like Belle, has a self-named song. His toady LeFou, played by Jesse Courtee, sings a vaguely homoerotic song about how great Gaston is, and the whole tavern joins in, and it's very iconic. And let me pause the movie on this shot of all of Gaston's hunting trophies. Mostly animals that are found only in North America. Way to fail geography, movie. So Maurice comes to the tavern begging for help, but none believe his tale of Belle being held in a dungeon by a monster. Gaston, being unaware that Belle is in fact being held captive somewhere, decides to blackmail Belle by threatening to have Maurice committed if she doesn't marry him. Belle here discovers and befriends the enchanted furniture, leading us to the big production number, Be Our Guest. Ooh, I can't wait to see how Quincy handles it. Preferably with me as Lumiere, but we'll see. Was that the Oscar winner for song that year? No, that would be the title number, but the score also won an Oscar. And Belle and Be Our Guest were also nominated. 3 songs from the same film can't be nominated for an Oscar anymore, I don't think. Perhaps Disney's own Enchanted was the last film where that happened. So the demonic furniture tries to coach the Beast on being more romantic. They don't want to force it, but they feel they have no choice. They've got one shot at reversing this curse. Beast has his magical scrying mirror, and the rose is clearly some sort of valuable enchanted object as well. He's weirdly protective of it. Perhaps because he's afraid that if it's destroyed, that'll make the curse permanent prematurely? Who knows, you know, in the fairy tale, his protectiveness of his roses was quite arbitrary. Did I have the gain turned down too low? Can you hear me now? A little better, I assume. Okay. Where was I? The character design in this movie, you know, I mean, I adore it, you know, just, overall is really good, you know, the Beast, brilliant, Belle is, you know, every other Disney princess, but, you know, looks good. You know, all the furniture is greatly designed, and all the townsfolk with their more cartoony designs than Belle are great, and, you know, the Bimbettes are... You know, the characters, it just wouldn't work in anything other than 2D animation, you know? Some, like Cogsworth, look like they came from an earlier film, like perhaps Alice in Wonderland. It's just such perfect, classic Disney. So Belle goes to the West Wing, the one place where she's not allowed. You had one job, Belle. Bad prisoner. But again, why he doesn't want her to touch the magic rose, I don't know. But he gets very angry, and, yeah, a man raising his voice is troubling, but not unforgivable, methinks. The smashing of furniture, yeah, that borders on abusive. Gotta say, the prince does not look 11 in the portrait of him, or for that matter in the stained glass flashbacks at the start of the film. Or for that one line about it having been 10 years, or alternatively, that one line about the rose blooming until the prince turned 21. It's both those lines together. That's the trouble. Anyway, Belle tries to run away, gets attacked by wolves, but the Beast comes to save her and is wounded in the process. As Belle patches him up back at the castle, they make amends for his temper and her snooping, and from here, they're friends. We cut briefly back to Gaston, talking with the guy who runs the asylum. One Monsieur Dark, a red-eyed bastard played beautifully by Tony J. I assume his very brief role here is what got him the role of Frollo in Hunchback 5 years later. Dark is completely on board with Gaston's evil plan. Thinks it's funny. Belle has her first costume change at this point in the movie, a rather plain green dress. That's not marketable. Green doesn't sell toys, so I hear. And then a few more costume changes during a montage. I guess they do stay together for quite some time. You know, in the previous scene, Gaston just told LeFou to keep watch until Maurice and Belle come home, and I guess LeFou did so. For a couple of months. And then there's the love song Something There, sung entirely in their heads as their relationship develops, and the Beast's only singing part in the film, just a single stanza, and he doesn't sound much like the Beast, just sounds like Robbie Benson singing. Benson is brilliant as the Beast. I think he could have sung that part better if they'd given him another take to fine-tune it and make it beastlier. Okay, this version does not have Human Again. It was cut from the film, but for the special edition DVD release, they finished the animation on it and put it in the film, right between Something There and the title number. I've seen the DVD a bunch of times, so I'm used to hearing Human Again, so it's a bit jarring when instead we jump ahead to the Beast's makeover scene. Human Again is a good song. You know what's not a good song? The Morning Report. I fucking hate The Morning Report, and unlike Human Again, there was no option on the Lion King DVD to just play the theatrical version. Blech. Getting ready for the film's signature scene takes place from the Beast's perspective. Why couldn't Belle have been the one to get a bath scene and a haircut she's completely nude for? Okay, that was a filthy joke even for me. Anyway, title number. Belle's bedazzled dress, Beast's suit, the amazing CGI ballroom, and animated camera work beyond anything Walt Disney could ever have dreamed. The best part? Angela Lansbury's performance of the beautiful song. Lansbury didn't want to do it. She thought the title number should go to someone other than Mrs. Potts, but agreed to do one take. That one take is what ended up in the movie. And it occurs to me I haven't thought of a Keys and Kingdom's justification for the living furniture. I guess people turned into animated objects is all the justification that's needed. The Beast is preparing to declare his love for Belle and ask her if she'll stay with him forever of her own free will, but before he can, she expresses a desire to see her father one last time. The Beast offers her his magic scrying mirror, and she discovers that he's been wandering the forest looking for her for, I guess, months? All the timelines in this movie are off the rails crazy. She wants to go rescue him, so the Beast releases her from her oath, giving her the mirror as a parting gift. He dooms his people to eternity as magical objects simply because he didn't have the nerve to hope she loves him as much as he loves her. Belle brings Maurice home, and LeFou alerts Gaston. They implement Gaston's plan, and Belle defies Gaston and decides to prove that Maurice isn't crazy by using the magic mirror to reveal the Beast. Detecting that the Beast is his love rival, Gaston stirs up the crowd into storming the castle and murdering the Beast. The villagers suck. I hope Belle didn't invite them to her wedding. And, you know, this is such a good musical, but I hate that the final number is the mob song. The mob song is fun and all, but the lyrics are just a bit too on the nose, and it being the last song of the movie is just anticlimactic. The Beast is unwilling to face the invaders, so the furniture fights back of their own initiative in a pretty comical fight scene, even though surely many villagers are being horribly maimed or killed. But hey, they're the bad guys. Gaston, though his weapon of choice has been a musket for most of the movie, hunts the Beast armed with a bow for some reason. I don't get it, but I like it. It makes the scene more primal. The furniture repel the invaders, all but Gaston, who confronts the Beast. Belle and Maurice pursue the mob, and the Beast regains his will to live when he sees she's come back for him, and the Beast fights Gaston. Gaston fights dirty, mortally wounding the Beast, but his dishonor gets him killed. No one falls to their death from a great height like Gaston. That's a House of Mouse joke. I mean, it's basically from the movie, but House of Mouse popularized it. House of Mouse isn't on Disney+. Shame, I'd like to binge it. Perhaps another time. As Belle cradles the dying Beast, she declares her love for him, which breaks the spell, turning him back into Prince Adam, which may be anything from his totally canon official name to a completely non-canon fan nickname. Sources disagree. Most people think he's more attractive as the Beast, but my mother, for one, thinks Prince Adam is the most attractive Disney man there is. I'm inclined to agree. He resembles Pocahontas' John Smith, if Smith wasn't a total Mary Sue. For the film's part, I think I once heard that the filmmakers themselves weren't happy with Adam's final design, but knew there was no way they could give him a satisfactory design, since by this point the audience would have fallen in love with the Beast. Indeed, Belle herself seems skeptical when she first sees him, and doesn't hug him until she recognizes from his eyes that this is indeed the same person as the Beast she fell for. And the film ends with a ballroom dance that looks suspiciously like recycled animation from Sleeping Beauty, but don't quote me on that. Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise are our directors. They did other things, I'm sure. And lyricist Howard Ashman was also an executive producer. Neat. And there's another Renaissance feature that The Little Mermaid was missing, the 90s pop ballad version of the movie's main theme. It's so tacky, but you gotta love it. And I like what they did here with the credits. A few future Renaissance films did this as well. They go character by character and give the voice actor and the supervising animator equal billing. So Paige O'Hara and James Baxter are given an equal amount of credit for being the character of Belle. Fair enough, right? Seeing as, if nothing else, Baxter probably spent more time playing with the character. Although it does puzzle me a bit how the animation teams are divided by character. How do they do their job when one character touches or lifts another? I gotta go to animation school. Bare minimum, I have to relearn how to draw so I can at least somewhat call myself an animator. Starting Skillshare courses on figure and character drawing, not animation just yet. Gotta relearn what I unlearned at some point. Let's see, while I'm reading the credits, who did they get to perform this cheesy ballad version of the title number? Celine Dion, she's awesome. And Peebo Bryson, that's a weird name, I don't recognize it. And the film is in memory of Howard Ashman, who died in '91, so shortly before the movie was finished, I suppose, but long enough that they were able to stick that dedication in the credits. Well, that was beautiful. I think everything I could say about Beauty and the Beast, I said during. I went off on quite a few tangents, but yeah. Roger Rabbit may have inspired the Renaissance, Little Mermaid may have started it, but Beauty and the Beast defined it. Is it raining? Late November, shouldn't it be snowing? No. Okay, bonus segment, or rather, bone segment. So as I promised an unspecified number of episodes earlier, I want to talk about Bone. Bone is a self-published comic book series by Jeff Smith about these three cartoon creatures, the Bone Cousins, who find themselves embroiled in a Lord of the Rings-esque high fantasy story in a mysterious, uncharted valley. It was recently announced that Netflix is going to be producing an adaptation of the comic book, so I wanted my fantasy adaptation of the series, which I've held onto for, gosh, over a decade now, on the record. When I was a teen and Zia was little, I used to read the entire series to her, doing all sorts of funny character voices, and I told her about all my dreams for adapting it. Just last year, Jeremy came home with a copy of the first graphic novel, and she said she just saw it at the library, and it piqued her interest, had no idea that it held a very special place for me and Zia. I showed Zia, hey, look what Jeremy found at the library, and Zia immediately remembered how I had wanted her to play one of the birds from the 5th book. That made me blush a little, the things kids remember. So my idea for the adaptation was as follows: a film trilogy, turning the 9 books into 3 epic-length films like The Lord of the Rings. Live action, with all the human characters and sets depicted in live action, most of the non-human characters being photoreal CGI or perhaps something a bit more practical, while the 3 Bone Cousins be depicted with Disney-quality 2D animation, taking the Roger Rabbit effect through to its natural conclusion by having even the clothes the Bones wear fit into the live-action environment, which they themselves simply don't. Okay, Fancast. Now, I don't have a copy of the series on hand, and it's been a few years since I had the chance to read it, so there's a slight chance I may have forgotten about the existence of some of the main characters, but I'll do my best. So for the Bone Cousins, we have Phone Bone, the calm and heroic youngest cousin, Phony Bone, the greedy and stingy eldest cousin, and Smiley Bone, the dim-witted middle cousin. My dream cast for the trio respectively would be Edward Norton as Phone Bone, Dennis Leary as Phony, and Bill Engvall as Smiley. I'm a bit ashamed because I've seen a couple of other Bone fan casts over the years, and most of them cast real voice actors as the Bones. Maybe there's something wrong with me that I went for relatively marketable big names. I just think they'd fit really, really well. Ed Norton has this very high voice that's like equal parts heroic leading man and cartoon character, and that's Phone Bone to a T. Phony Bone is very loud and obnoxious, and given the choice, I'd play him myself, but if I had to go with someone who wasn't me, Dennis Leary has the comedic chops. And Smiley Bone, well, I don't know if this is an interpretation completely unique to me, but there's a lot of southernness to Bone, a southern wholesomeness, so I think the popular Texan comedian simply is Smiley. I went through quite a few phones and phonies in my head, but if anyone other than Bill Engvall is Smiley, it just won't sit right with me. Our 3 human characters are Thorn, a 20-year-old farm girl who's secretly the superpowered princess of the valley, her grandmother, Grandma Ben, the alias of the retired queen Rose Harvestar, and Rose's sweetheart, Lucius Down. I would cast Emma Watson as Thorn, affecting an American accent most of the time, but using her natural voice for the Princess Thorn, who occasionally appears in dreams. I was fan-casting Emma Watson and stuff way back when she had nothing but Hermione to her name, and she certainly proved herself as a capable non-Hermione actress, as well as a very effective and admirable real-world person. For Grandma Ben, I would cast Kristen Wiig. I think that with heavy makeup, she'd be simply great as the kooky old lady Grandma presents herself as in the early books, but also prove herself as the more serious side of the character arises, and we see the beautiful younger Rose in flashbacks. Same actress. And for Lucius, James Denton. Same deal. Cast a guy who can play both the elder and the younger Lucius. I've never seen James Denton in anything other than Desperate Housewives, but, you know, a decade ago I was pretty into Desperate Housewives. Now, up next I'm going to talk about all the human characters, just kind of a thing that happens when you imagine a live-action adaptation. You split up the human and non-human characters. Let's start with the three barroom boys, Wendell, Euclid, and Jonathan Oakes. Just regular patrons at Lucius's bar who find themselves entangled in the war. I would respectively cast Owen Wilson, Jason Segel, and Jack McBrayer. Just some guys who look like the characters and seemingly would sound like them, in my opinion, given the southernness I perceive in the series. I'd probably cast it a bit differently if I'd been thinking of it as animated. But this works. For our main antagonist, the hooded one, I'd want that character to be simultaneously portrayed by Edward Norton and Kristen Wiig. Wiig in the costume, and both of them doing the voice simultaneously, with Norton's voice being more prominent. This is because of an early scene when the hooded one appears in Thorne's dream and assumes Phonebone's form to lure her in. I thought having the hooded one voiced by Phonebone's actor the whole time would enhance the creepy of that moment. From there, when the hood comes off and the hooded one turns out to be the undead corpse of Rose's older sister Briar, the character would still be voiced by both actors, but Wiig's voice becoming the more prominent of the two. The last three books debut a whole bunch of new human characters, starting with the headmaster of the Venneon. Given his old bearded appearance, I'd go with Christopher Lloyd, who hasn't done anything good in ages, as far as I can tell. Shame, I could, gotta get him into this. A character known simply as Teacher appears later. I got strong David Wenham vibes from him, very grand and hammy. And for his companion, the diminutive dreaming master Murmy, well, I imagined the late legendary June Foray in that role. I couldn't possibly recast, at least not in my live-action fantasy. How many 99-year-old 4'10" animation legends are there? Not a lot. We also meet the former headmaster. At this point, I was finding the series excessively white, so I thought I'd cast James Hong. I like him. He's a cool old guy. And for the minor villain Lord Tarsal, I would go with Jaimin Hunsu. And I swear to God, I cast Hunsu in this role because I thought he had the voice and physicality for it, and clearly someone agreed with me, because someone cast him as a different scarred, one-armed veteran of battling dragons in How to Train Your Dragon 2. Go figure. Now, I wanted to cast as many roles as possible, which is hard in live action, so I ended up imagining Doug Jones, Warwick Davis, and Harry Shearer playing many assorted live-action roles throughout the trilogy. And now for the voice roles. We'll start with the two nameless characters known simply as the stupid rat creatures. I would cast Billy Crystal and Martin Short. Most fan casts I've seen try to portray these two characters as genuinely menacing. In fact, even the two Bone video games gave them pretty deep, menacing voices. But no, these guys are total dorks. They're the comic relief of the whole series. I don't understand some people for their casting choices. And speaking of which, for the Great Red Dragon, Sam Elliott. I've seen some other fan casts, just no. Sean Connery, James Earl Jones? No. Did you even read the comics? Obviously, the Great Red Dragon has the mannerisms of a wise old cowboy. He is Sam Elliott. I'm not Sam Elliott, but, okay, if I'd taken a moment to get into it, there we go. Now I'm Sam Elliott. And then Ted the Bug, well, I always wanted to go with Bobby J. Thompson, but maybe that was a misstep. A lot of people interpret Ted as being a southerner. I, however, saw so much southernness in most of the other characters that I interpreted Ted's mannerisms as Ebonics. I also interpreted him as a child, since he's a tiny bug with a big brother several hundred times his size, but after 10 years, Bobby J. Thompson isn't a child anymore, so, I don't know, might have to rethink that. Well, I don't need to. I'm not the guy in charge of adapting Bone. They're really doing that now. For King Doc, the chieftain of the rat creatures, I think now's the time to finally start throwing in some real voice actors such as Kevin Michael Richardson. And for our man behind the man, the Lord of the Locusts, Jim Cummings. For Phonebone's friend Miss Possum, I'd cast Mary Jo Catlett, and for her three sons, I'd cast master rank voice actresses Tara Strong, Greta Lyle, and Cree Summer. The middle of the series debuts a few more non-human characters such as Rockjaw, the giant mountain lion. My original choice for the role was Alan Rickman. After he died, I suddenly started imagining Ron Perlman. He'd be a good choice too. I guess that derives from a fan cast I saw that chose Perlman as both Rockjaw and the Lord of the Locusts. Rockjaw's self-named book also debuts Roderick the Raccoon, leader of a band of heartwarming orphans. I'd cast Elizabeth Daly in this role. And finally, there's Bartleby, our token good rat creature. Frank Welker. Bartleby does nothing but hiss in the first two books in which he appears, so that's nice and Welkery. Then when he talks, I imagine Welker keeping the role, putting on an adorable squeaky voice. And I do want to briefly touch upon the prequel comics, which I've only read once a piece, never owned them, so I don't remember very many of the characters, but the characters I do remember, I want to cast. In the first prequel, Rose, which is written by Jeff Smith but not illustrated by him, has an interesting painted art style. The only character unique to that prequel I remember is Balsad, the river dragon, and I sort of pictured Greg Proops in that role for whatever reason. I just thought that would work. And the other prequel, The Adventures of Big Johnson Bone, which is illustrated by Jeff Smith but not written by him. Go figure. There are lots of characters, but I only remember three, one being Big Johnson Bone himself, who I picture played by Ed Asner. There's the rat creature Queen Maud, who strikes me as a Tress MacNeille type, and her jumbo-sized son Tyson, who's definitely a Fred Tatasciore type. There's also a series of novels with illustrations by Jeff Smith. It's a distant sequel. I've never read it. I don't know very much about it. I don't even know the title. I only know that the two stupid rat creatures get names in it, because it's prose, and thus it's harder to keep the characters nameless. They get named Stinky and Smelly, respectively. I also know that an adult Roderick appears in it, but I'd have to see what that character's mannerisms are before I'd try casting that character. Maybe the Netflix adaptation will cover the prequels and the novels, who knows? Alright, that wraps up podcast number 40. Still trying and failing to do these every single day, but I'll catch up eventually. I am unemployed. I have the gift of time. For the record, I'll probably go back to providing some labor when the restaurant reopens in March. From there, my mom wants to take a little vacay to Sweden around late April, early May. And after that, well, I guess I'll go back to Quincy and try to figure my way from there. Maybe find an apartment near the theater, find a job near my apartment. Maybe I'll finally get a life, who's to say?